So, ladies and gentlemen, November is Christophobia month. And I want to talk about Christophobia. The reason why we have a Christophobia month is to raise awareness about Christophobia, which is the prejudice directed against Christians solely because they are Christians. This is a phenomena that you can see all around the world, as Christians are the most persecuted group in the world by far. And so this month is a month to raise awareness about that fact, ladies and gentlemen, because too many people don't know anything about the plight of Christians around the world. The point of this month is also, ladies and gentlemen, to cultivate solidarity amongst Christians around the world. Because when one Christian is persecuted anywhere in the world, then it is the cause of all Christians around the world. It is not something that we should ignore. And so it is right and proper for us to popularize the idea of solidarity amongst Christians and to raise awareness about their persecution. And so why not have a month to do it in? And why November should be that month? Because the hypocritical liberal elites have decided, following the prompts by Islamists, to make November Islamophobia month. So if they want to talk about Islamophobia, let us instead talk about Christophobia, about the persecution of Christians everywhere. And I want to give 3 examples of what I'm talking about. The first one is Nigeria, where there is an anti-Christian genocide being carried out right now. And isn't it strange, ladies and gentlemen, that all the same voices that were so loud talking about the genocide in Palestine suddenly are so quiet about the genocide of Christians in Nigeria? Why, I ask? Is it because they are black? Is it because they are poor? Or is it because they are Christian? Or is it because of all 3 that Gary Lineker doesn't care? That all the liberal elites don't care? Tens of thousands of Christians have been killed in Nigeria. Entire villages wiped out. Hundreds of girls kidnapped to be made sexual slaves of Islamists who are following the example of Muhammad and the companions. We have, ladies and gentlemen, churches being burned, people being murdered indiscriminately by Fulani Islamist herdsmen and groups like Boko Haram. Christians are being butchered and the world doesn't want to hear. Why? Because it destroys the narratives of our liberal elites that want to tell us that Islam is a religion of peace, that all religions can just get along. What, ladies and gentlemen, should be done about this? All of us must raise awareness about the plight of persecuted Christians as a moral obligation towards justice if you have a conscience. But you who are Christian have a greater responsibility because you are part of the body of Christ. And the scriptures teach when one part of the body suffers, all suffer together. And we cannot separate the plight of Nigerian Christians from ourselves. And so, American Christians, I say to you directly that you must put pressure on Donald Trump as your president to make good on his promise for military intervention in Nigeria. That we must press for the American military, the most powerful military in the world, to create exclusion zones and push the Islamists back into Muslim areas and away from the Christian centre and the Christian South. We must, ladies and gentlemen, call out false and weak and erroneous Nigerian pastors who have taught bad theology whilst these crimes were going on. Theology influences how you see the world. Your theology influences how you behave in the world. And theology can be applied to different aspects of life. There is a theology of ecology, a theology of social justice, a theology of racial justice, a theology of prosperity, which is a lie, that has misguided the Church of Nigeria so that Nigerian Christians have been encouraged to pursue blessings and wealth whilst their brothers and sisters in the north are being slaughtered, and whilst their brothers and sisters in central Nigeria, in the plateau area, are being wiped out. The theology that you teach is important because it frames Christian life. The theology that Nigerian Christians need is a theology of dominion. The idea that Christians should seize the state and the economy and culture and use such things for the betterment of the church. A revised version of the theology of liberation from persecution is what the Nigerian church needs, so that Nigerian Christians organize themselves to have solidarity with those tens of thousands of Christians who are being butchered in Nigeria even now as you hear my voice. Just a few days ago, hundreds of Christian girls were kidnapped to be made slaves of Islamists, to be raped day after day after day, whilst the feminazis and progressive liberal talkers in British society are silent about their plight. The Nigerian church needs a theology of martyrdom so that they are willing to die for their faith and willing to die to defend one another. And the Christian world, through pressuring governments like the American government, should help the Nigerian Christians to split Nigeria in two so that the central and south Nigeria can be free of the Islamists because they can control their own security, ladies and gentlemen. Nigeria should be split up by the world, just like the world split up Yugoslavia into Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia-Herzegovina. And now, as they've split Kosovo off from Serbia, if the world can do it to Yugoslavia, why can't the world do it to Africa and to Nigeria, and to separate Nigeria into different countries. That's my first example of Christophobia in the world. My second example, brother, could I get a bottle of water? And second example, ladies and gentlemen, is France. In France, ladies and gentlemen, tens of thousands of churches have been attacked and vandalized. Some have suffered arson attacks, others graffiti attacks, others have had their windows smashed. There have been attacks upon priests who have been martyred whilst they were celebrating the Mass in France by Islamists. It is the worst kept secret in the world that those that are attacking Catholic churches in France are Muslim migrants. But yet, the French state and the European Union elites are not talking about Christophobia. What are they talking about? They're talking about Islamophobia. And yet more churches have been attacked in France than mosques. So why aren't we talking about Christophobia? The church in France needs better leadership, because many of its prelates and bishops simply parrot and repeat the talking points and the narrative of the liberal, secular, atheist elites. Like recently a prelate in Nigeria did when he denied the Christian genocide, or like when a prelate in the Vatican did who denied the Christian genocide in Nigeria. We actually need in the Church of France Christian leaders who give a damn about Christians. Because too many of our leaders want to be politicians like Macron, and they want to follow the politics of liberal secularism, not the politics of Christian solidarity. The church in France needs to adopt the Benedict option. Why? Because the state has demonstrated that it is unwilling or unable to protect the Christian community. And so Christians must organize themselves so that they can guarantee their own security in France. And the only way to do that is to consolidate geographically, ladies and gentlemen, so that we can organize ourselves to create community security groups who will look after and protect our own communities. Furthermore, the Christians of France must reject the principles of the Republic. They must reject the idea of French identity, because it is the principles of the Republic that are destroying the Republic and endangering the Christians of France. And so the Christians of France must adopt a Christian nationalism, the idea that the church is a nation and that the church can pursue its own political agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, the Christians of France must pursue Christianity as a civilizational project, ladies and gentlemen. There is a quiet revival occurring in France right now. Tens of thousands of baptisms reported by the Roman Catholic Church. New evangelical churches being founded in France every single day, ladies and gentlemen, every single week, sorry. But this Christian revival in France if it does not commit itself to a civilizational project, will be a blip in history for reasons I will explain in my next talk. The third and final example of Christophobia that we must talk about is the one in America, in Dearborn, Michigan, where Muslims have adopted the Benedict option and made themselves the majority population. The Christians of Dearborn, Michigan are suffering from discrimination and persecution. This involves being prevented from evangelism when Muslims are allowed to do evangelism. This involves being forced to hear the Adhan being blasted into their homes by megaphones day in, day out. This involves everyday intimidation of the Christian population in Dearborn, including being told that they don't belong in that city. Or not being represented, or their concerns not being represented by the Muslim politicians elected by the Muslim majority. This is the power of the Benedict option. It works for everyone that uses it, and it is time that Christians recognize that fact and adopted it and began using it themselves. My statement to American Christians, every one of you, everywhere, need to unite and help the Christians of Dearborn push back against Islamization by using every possible strategy, social, political, economic, and spiritual, ladies and gentlemen. Furthermore, in America, you have the establishment of Sharia courts across America, particularly in Texas. That means that Americans are standing by when two different legal systems are being created in your society. Ladies and gentlemen, the reality is that it is the very failings of the American Constitution that have allowed that to happen. If Americans are against the rise of Sharia courts, they need to abandon Americanism. They need to lose faith with the American Constitution, because it is the American Constitution that has allowed this to happen. What needs to happen is that the American church needs to pursue the idea of transforming America into a new Christendom, a Christian state, a confessing state, a state that lives by Christian values and Christian principles, makes Christian laws, and that outlaws Sharia. Liberalism has no liberal reason to stop the advancement or the practice of Sharia law, but Christian law would, because Christian law as a principle says that there should be one law and all citizens are equal under that one law.